हेलो स्टूडेंट्स, टुडे वी विल डिस्कस अबाउट एलिगरी। आज हम एलिगरी के बारे में पढ़ेंगे कि एलिगरी होती क्या है। ओके, एलिगरी इज डिफाइंड एज अ स्टोरी और डिस्क्रिप्शन इन विच द कैरेक्टर्स रिप्रेजेंट आइडियाज सच एज पैशंस, प्योरिटी एंड ट्रूथ। Truth and types of personality. We resort to allegory when we describe a subject under the guise of some other subjects which has apt and suggestive resemblances to first one. Okay? Allegory is often described as an extended narrative, extended metaphor or extended simile, since it carries a second meaning along with its literal meanings. Allegory is a major symbolic mode which has fallen into some critical dispute in this century, though it flourishes in satire, underground literature and science fiction. Allegory came much more naturally to the Renaissance writers than it does to modern ones. The almost universal Renaissance view of the universe in terms of various levels of correspondence encouraged the tendency to discover relationship in every direction and to express one thing in terms of another, thereby cultivating all forms of allegory. Okay? इसकी मेन करेक्टरिस्टिक्स पढ़ेंगे। इसकी मेन करेक्टरिस्टिक्स। Generally, characters in an allegory do not have individual psychologies. They are incarnations of abstract ideas and may bear such names as luxury, pride, meekness, etc. They turn in typically cipher a proxy for the reader because the action is assumed to take place in the rather like Johnsonian humorous, demonically possessed by fear, desire or need, and often represent jealousy, greed, modesty, etc. Allegory distinctive features is that it is a structural rather than textual symbolism. It is a large-scale exposition in which problems are conceptualized and analyzed into their constituent parts in order to be stated, if not solved. Simplex and complex allegory. Allegory may be simple or complex. In simple allegory, the fiction is wholly subordinate to abstract moral. An example is the fable, which is directed primarily at the set of ideas expressed in its moral. Simple historical allegories occur in some of the later prophecies of the Bible, such as allegory of the four kingdoms of Daniel. More complex historical and political allegories develop a strongly ironic tone, resulting from the fact that the allegorist talks about one series of incidents when he is actually talking about another. Hence, there is a close connection between historical or political allegory and satire. Next are techniques. Moral allegories are apt to be deeply serious in tone. In these allegories, fiction is supposed to provide entertainment and the allegorical instructions. The basic technique of moral allegory is personification, where a character represents an abstract idea. The simple the allegory, the moral urgently the reader's attention is directed to the allegorical meaning. Hence, the simple or native moral allegory belongs primarily to educational literature, to the fables and moralities of the schoolroom, the parables and examples of the pulpit. The morals which illustrate familiar ideas in official building, often the allegorist is interested in his additional meaning to care whether his fiction is consistent or not as a fiction. Even Spencer occasionally drops into native allegory in the first book of the Fairy Queen. The Red Cross Knight is being taught by Faith and Hope argue him to take holder of her anchor. The traditional emblem of hope, it is possible to think of hope as a female teacher dragging her anchor into classroom. But it is simpler to think that literate narrative is being incessantly distorted by the allegorical interest. Next, various forms of allegory. Various literary forms may be regarded as special types of allegory in that they narrate one coherent set of circumstances which signify a second order of correlated meanings. A fable is a short story designed to inculcate a moral about some aspect of human behavior. Sometimes the moral or lesson is implied in the fable, sometimes it is explicitly stated in brief form at the end. Most fables employ beasts and words to represent the deeds and motives of human beings. Animals talk like the human types they present in Chaucer's The Nun's Priest's Tale. The story of the cock and the fox is beast fable. The plot of Ben Jonson's Balcony is derived from the beast fable. The fox is almost always sly and malicious. Jonson's Balcony is a clever impostor like many a fox of the beast fable. Johnson explains the greed of such characters as the lawyer Walter, the miser Corvatio, and the merchant Corvino. Balcon pretends to be dead, as the rapacious creature gather round each aspect to own his wealth. Like many of the foxes on the fable, Balcony is tricked in the end. In our times in Animal Farm, George Orwell expanded the beast fable into a sustained satire on the political and social condition of our age. Next है parable. Discussion of allegory inevitably involves some mention of parable. A parable is a short narrative presented so as to stress the implied but detailed analogy between its components, part, and a thesis or lesson that the narrator is trying to bring home to us. The parable was one of Christ's favorite devices as a teacher. Examples are his parables of the good Samaritan, of the prodigal son, of the tree, etc. Here is a parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in a search of fine pearls, who on finding a pearl of great value went and sold all that he had and bought it. Last, exemplum. An exemplum is a story told to illustrate a moral point. The telling of example was a common practice of preachers in the Middle Ages, and from the sermon the form passed into literature. Unlike the parable, the exemplum was usually presumed to be true, and the moral is placed at the beginning rather than at the end. In Chaucer's Partner's Tale, the partner's preaching on the thesis greed is root of all evil incorporates as exemplum the tale of the three revelers who set out to find death, but find a heap of gold instead, then kill one another in the attempt to gain sole possession of the treasure. Main English allegorical works analyzed from Chaucer to Vane. ओके, कौन कौन से राइटर? चौसर हैं, स्पेंसर हैं, विलियम्स, पिलग्रिम्स प्रोग्रेस। चौसर का है एलेगोरिकल द हाउस ऑफ द फेम एंड द पार्लियामेंट ऑफ फॉल्स। एक एलेगोरिकल पोएम्स है इन अ जनरल यूरोपियन ट्रेडिशन। स्पेंसर की फेरी क्वीन है जो कि 1590 से 96 तक लिखी गई। इसमें 6 बुक हैं। ओके, ये भी कंटिन्यूस एलेगरी है। इसमें लगभग जो प्लान था वो 24 बुक्स को इंक्लूड करने का था, बट इसमें ज़्यादा नहीं हो पाई। ओके, नेक्स्ट विलियम्स पिलग्रिम्स प्रोग्रेस। ये भी एक 1678 में लिखी गई बुक। इसमें क्या है, इसको रिप्रेजेंट किया गया है इंडिविजुअल क्रिश्चियंस स्ट्रगल टू अचीव साल्वेशन। इसको रिप्रेजेंट किया गया। सम ऑब्जेक्शन टू एलेगोरिकल फॉर्म्स ऑफ लिटरेचर। इसमें सम ऑब्जेक्शंस हैं। There are various theoretical objections to allegory as a literary form. Even the most sophisticated allegory purposes a separation between the idea and the objects through which it is expressed. The mechanical nature of the parallels and their development, the appeal of allegory to the intellect rather than to imagination, and the instinctive feelings are the common sources of discontent.